Hello and welcome to everybody who's joining us tonight. We'll give a few minutes here for people to join. You are joining the Yelm Highway Community Park Master Plan. And we have a good agenda lined up for tonight, and we're glad you're all here. So we'll just give a few more minutes for people to start filing in, and then we'll get started. All right, let's go to we'll go ahead and get started here tonight. So first off, what we wanted to do is go through and introduce who will be presenting tonight. And first off, we have Paul Simmons, the director from Olympia Parks Recreation and Arts Department. And we also have Laura Keehan, who's a Parks Planning and Design Manager for the project. Myself, Andy Mitten, I'm with Berger Partnership, Landscape Architects, and joining me tonight is Matt Martinson, who will be guiding you through the presentation along with Laura. And we have a couple other folks here, Steph Bruchart, who is from Berger Partnership, who's going to be driving the presentation tonight and providing assistance, as well as Jonathan Turlov from Olympia Parks as well, who will be helping out answering questions, which, speaking of, we do have a portion of the presentation tonight where we will be doing a Q&A. Just a reminder to please use the Q&A chat box, which you can find if you hover over the bottom part of your screen. We'll have more information on that. Please limit the chat feature to technical questions and any questions you have so they can be recorded appropriately into the Q&A. All right, and with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Laura Keehan, who will start off the presentation tonight.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in tonight. Steph, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. This is just a picture of the site, which most of you, if you're here, you're probably somewhat familiar with. Okay, so I wanted to just take a minute to go over the timeline that we've been in with this project. We kicked off back in September 2019, and that was with the site visit at the future park site. We had a great meeting out there, and there was an associated online survey that was on Engage Olympia. We took all the information and feedback from the public that we received, and the design team put together 3 concept plans that we brought to the public in February of 2020. We had an in-person meeting, and there was also an online survey associated with that. And then, of course, everything changed and COVID happened, and the project was put on hold for a few months. And it was during that time that we received a phone call from the Olympia School District, and they were wondering about if there was a possibility to co-locate a school at the future park site. So we sort of kind of pivoted a bit and came back to the public over Zoom at this point now in November 2020 to talk about this proposal that the school district was making to also co-locate a school on the site. There was an online feedback mechanism there as well. And then that basically brings us to today, here in August 2020, where we're going to talk about a master plan for the southern portion of the site. The northern portion is where the school may or may not end up going. There has not been any decision made yet as to whether that will happen. So, but we are going to try and move forward, since it is a large site, move forward in the southern half of the site. And so we will have, after tonight, this will be recorded, this meeting, it will be posted to Engage Olympia, along with another online survey. And Steph, you can go to the next slide. And then at the beginning of next year, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee will review a proposed master plan for this project, and the city council will also do that probably, hopefully in February. Then we start to move into what, this kind of long phase for permitting, construction documents, grant writing, and that lasts for the better part of a year and a half. We're hoping to have construction in 2024, and then finally the park could open in 2025. And go ahead to the next slide. And as I mentioned, there has not been a decision yet on the co-location with the school at the site, but we have been receiving a lot of input. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee reviewed the public input from the online meeting and the online survey tool. They did make a 4-3 recommendation to not pursue partnership with the school district at the site, and that was forwarded to the Olympia City Council. And so with that recommendation letter from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, they made, I think, about 7 or 8 different points. And so now the school district is responding to some of those points, and the design team is looking at them, and all that information will be given back to the city council, who will hopefully take up the issue and make a decision by the end of this year, likely in the fall or winter of this year. And then we'll know where we're going with the school or not. And I'm going to hand it over to Matt now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We just wanted to kind of kick off our part of this presentation with a poll. It should have popped up on your screen. We're just trying to find out from the audience here how close people are to the site. So we'll give this a couple minutes. So we've got almost 50% participation. Is everyone, I think I'm only seeing the results, but it looks like 4 people in the 0 to 1/4 mile range. We've got 2 people in the 1/4 to 1 mile, another person in the 1 to 5 miles. And you should be able to see the results now. Can someone from the team confirm that everyone's seeing the results? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, they should be able
Cool.
to see it now.
Cool. So this is good. Yeah, we'll dig into the presentation now. So I just wanted to go over kind of what we're hoping to get out of the presentation here. And so, Laura has already done number 1. She shared an update on the schedule, kind of convey where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. I'm going to start off by recapping the kind of master planning effort to date, and including the public input. I'm not going to be able to go over all the public input, but what I'll try to do is describe kind of the things that the public has expressed the greatest preference for, and the things that have been really highly desired. After that, we will look at some of the concerns that we've heard from the community, and also the design and how we've responded to those concerns. That should take us to close to 7, at which point we can open the discussion to have Q&A as well as open comment period. And we go to the next slide. So you can actually ask questions now. I won't answer them at this part of the presentation, but if they're the type of question that our team can answer while I'm presenting, they'll go ahead and do that. Otherwise, we'll try and get to them later. And if we can't get to them later, we will respond to them, and those responses will be up on the Engage Olympia page. All right, so yeah, public meetings number 1 and 2. We're really kind of program focused, and by program, it's really a list of input from the community representing the most preferred activities and amenities, and you see all them listed out here. What we strive to do is incorporate as many of these as possible into the design. In this case, we have all of them, and a couple other different things too. Go to the next slide, please. Just a quick reminder, This is an analysis of input that we prepared. All of this input is still available on the Engage Olympia site. And so if you want to go in and dig in and see, actual quantity of responses and how preferred these things are, that's all available there. At meeting 2, we were less focused on program and more focused on experiences. And just here's a summary, and I'll read these off, of some of the most preferred and most often stated experiences. It was interesting to see that most people said that they would use not just the sports fields, but other amenities. People preferred to travel through the park on foot, followed by running and bicycling. There was a lot of support for protecting and enhancing the natural features, as well as opportunities to learn more about them, as well as lighting, not everywhere in the park, but lighting of spaces in addition to the sports fields. There was a strong desire to be able to reserve outdoor spaces for gatherings and events. That takes the form of like picnic shelters of a variety of scales in the design. And then, as a landscape architect, I really loved this last one. There was the bar graph had all the bars pretty much like right at the same level, but it told me there was this preference from the community for a lot of different paving types. So we have boardwalks, dirt paths, crushed rock, wood chip paths, asphalt pathways, which I think makes for a really rich experience. And then, as Laura mentioned, the public meeting number 3 was all co-location focused. And we collected a ton of input there. It's all been passed along to the school district, the PRAC, and city council. Now we're going to dive into concerns, and I'll admit this isn't like a comprehensive list. It is the list of all the most commonly heard concerns and the most significant concerns. So we'll try to go through all of these. We've kind of divided them up into a couple buckets. We got parking lot concerns, concerned about where it is on the site, and then kind of all the environmental and traffic concerns related to that. We've got a neighborhood on the west and also on the east that have kind of different concerns about how the park relates to them. And then there's also just this general concern we've heard from the community about the school co-location, the kind of unknowns associated with that. But before we kind of dive into this parking lot location concern, I just wanted to go really quickly through the actual area available in the park. We've got about 86.5 total acres of park area. There's a number of critical areas that we can't really use for intensive uses. The wetland buffer, those are 13 and 10 acres. There's the lifetime lease area that's shown in the blue rectangle, where the person who sold the land to the city will live for the rest of their lifetime. There is the potential secondary school campus. That's 20 acres at the north side of the site. And then I've added just the 3 full-size fields, which is another 6 acres, and a maintenance facility. And that really leaves about only 28 acres available for intensive uses, which are, things like parking, sports fields, paving, picnic shelters, playgrounds. So right off the bat, we don't have that full 86 acres to locate the parking in. Go to the next slide. Okay, now that we kind of have that understanding of the land available, let's look at why we've located the parking lot where it is. Vehicular access to the park. So there's kind of 3 main options here. They're not all shown on this slide, but I can talk through them. There's our preferred access, which is off Wiggins, ultimately off Yelm Highway. There's an existing light there that already controls traffic. That location allows vehicles to enter the park without passing through a single family neighborhood, and also allows great access to the maintenance facility that you see there, kind of middle top of that graphic, without maintenance vehicles having to travel through the park. The second vehicular access we looked at but decided not to use is at Yelm Highway and Landview Drive, which is essentially where the strawberry stand is right now. It is really close to the light already at Wiggins, and traffic engineers typically discourage 2 lights located that close. It's possible it could work, but it would need to be heavily justified by data. I have a slide later for this, but our traffic study is in progress right now. Lastly, we looked at a potential access off Hampton Street in Devonshire. There's no light there. It's also on Yelm. It would need to outlet to Yelm Highway where there's a convex curve, which is also discouraged by traffic engineers. And then I think kind of the biggest con for that one is that it would route park traffic and maintenance traffic through a single family neighborhood. So for all those reasons, we've kind of landed on the Wiggins access. And so if you remember that the concerns, there's the environmental concerns, including noise pollution, light pollution, and air pollution. Kind of looking at these and thinking about how we can mitigate them as designers and doing a little bit of research. All of these concerns are pretty similar to concerns you'd hear about like a highway project, albeit likely a lot less severe. And so our kit of parts to address those problems actually follows the kit of parts used to address those. And so I'll just say a number of DOTs, including WashDOT, provide publications on mitigation measures with a preference towards 3 key strategies. Distance is the first one. And so what we've tried to do is provide as much room as possible between the Indian Summer neighborhood and the parking lot, which our minimum is 80 feet. The next kit apart is vertical barriers. What you see often is in the form of walls for like highways and road projects, but berms are actually more effective at attenuating sound. And so we're showing here a 6-foot tall berm with kind of gentle slopes. And this berm would be effective at providing a line of sight barrier. And then our third kit of parts here is planting. And so on top of the berm, not just on top, but on the side slopes as well, we would propose to plant native trees and shrubs. But we don't want to create like a super dense forest. We just want to arrange them and plant enough such that you can't see through it, but we don't want to create like a place people could hide or camp. There's a couple other really kind of, we go back for a second. Smaller things we can do that we plan to do for the parking lot. There will be electric car stalls. We will add signs and enforcement of anti-idling requirements. And then just from a design standpoint, we've provided 2-way drive aisles throughout to minimize stacking of cars trying to enter and exit the parking lot. Also worth noting is that parking lot does have pretty significant tree planting that probably exceeds what's required, including a stormwater swale running down the middle. So it's a pretty park-like parking lot. We go to next slide. Just a reminder, I mentioned this earlier, but our traffic study is currently underway. The traffic engineers are looking at all those access points that I mentioned earlier. They are studying the trips generated from all the different park uses, as well as parking stalls needed. They are looking at the secondary school impacts as well. And so that study is going to tell us, if our selected access works, any improvements that need to be made, and just kind of, it'll show what needs to be done traffic-wise to make this all work. Next slide. So now we're going to look at the concern from the Hamptons neighborhood, which I believe, and we can always talk about this later in the discussion part, but I believe the concern is about people parking in the neighborhood and traveling from those on-street stalls into the park. And so, we can't really do anything about the public parking available there, but what we can do is provide more desirable parking that's closer to all the core park amenities that has the right amount of parking counts. And so that's what we've done here. In the diagram, you just see a distance from Hamptons to the core of the park. And that's probably like the closest someone could park in the Hamptons to get to the park, and then also from the parking lot. And so it's a lot less distance. Next slide, please. And then the concerns on Indian Summerside on the east side of the park are different. This community is already fenced. It's a gated, restricted access access community. And so we understand this concern to be less about parking in the neighborhood and more about park users accessing the neighborhood through the east edge of the park. Some considerations here. We're not proposing any pathways on the berm or along that edge. There is an existing 6-foot fence of property line which will remain. And the homes there will be mostly, if not fully, screened by the park, from the park by berms and buffer planting. And lastly, we've kind of moved on from the neighbor concerns to a concern we heard, I think it was at one of the public meetings, about the dog park. We had formerly showed it. It was up closer near Yelm Highway, and there was just a general safety concern about dogs being able to get out and interface with traffic and those dangers. And so we looked and we found a great place in an opening in the forest here. We think this is a big win. It allows people with dogs to park right next to the dog park, so they're not traveling through the park with off-leash dogs as well. And we'll dig into the detail of that a little later. Next slide. So that kind of caps the concern summary and mitigation summary of the presentation. And I just want to reorient everyone to the site before we dive into the design. Remember the berry stand right up there on Yelm Highway. We talked about Indian Summer and Hamptons is also the Wiggins Road access. And the way this is structured, I'm going to just kind of dive through all the different things on the site, show you where they are, and then we're going to come back to each one and look at the detail of it. So right here, we've got our soccer fields and sports fields right in the core of the park. And Steph, I think we can move through these pretty quick. Right here, we've got playgrounds and spray grounds, mostly located between the fields in the core area, and then along that west, kind of where the park interfaces with the lifetime lease in the Oak area. We have a variety of trails everywhere, as well as, not everywhere, but accessing most areas of the park, and a couple loops, and we'll look at the distances of those later. Again, there are more trails here, but these are for bikes. We've got two types. There's kind of like a forested bike skills loop, and then more of an open area also. And the community garden, it would start on the west and could be expanded all the way along that ellipse as needed, as the need grows. And then picnic shelters, we wanted to kind of put them throughout the park so they could serve people doing different amenities, as well as have a variety of scale of those to suit bigger groups and smaller groups. Restrooms, kind of one main Mondo restroom to support the field complex, and then another one near the spray ground to support the playground and spray areas. And then pickleball and basketball courts. We've got a skate park located here kind of in our, what we're calling like a play area core near the spray ground and playground. We already talked about the dog park, and then don't want to forget the next one, the farm and berry stand. And parking. Cool. Now we can go in and kind of dive into the specifics of these. Just kind of wanted to show this. So we've got our vehicular access coming in off Wiggins. That allows vehicles to enter that maintenance facility, kind of top left, without having to really travel through the park. So that's all kind of a vehicular thing. The dashed lines on the left are all pedestrian paths. Those are primarily sidewalks. And then there's this big loop path that goes around the park that's not just for pedestrians, but provides the opportunity for emergency responders, law enforcement, and service access to access all the main elements in the park. And then not to be forgotten, there's a potential connection to the Chehalis Western Trail out through the far east of the site. All right. This is an awesome site. Like, I love going out there and seeing these existing features, and these pictures you see here are all things we've been inspired from and are trying to pick up in the park. Just to name these, we've got the Gary oak trees. It's a native, not very common tree, but definitely one that has a great role in the ecosystems here. There's the really cool kind of farm character and the berries, as well as wetlands and forests. And we can go to the next slide. We don't want to just protect those. We want to actually like enhance them and kind of build on the character of the park. And so this Gary Oak Savanna enhancement is something that'll come up kind of throughout. But what we're trying to do is acknowledge what's there, protect it, and actually enhance it with our park plannings and build on that character. And so here we've just kind of diagrammed these existing features, and I'll start at the top left. There's that Doug Fir Grove right out along Yelm Highway. That'll screen the maintenance facility from Yelm Highway, as well as provide a very like park forward experience along Yelm Highway that'll be there no matter what decision is made on the secondary school study or co-location proposal, I should say. After that, and this is probably something a lot of you have seen when you go by the site, even if you haven't entered it, there's this line of mature Doug firs and deciduous shade trees running almost due east-west through the site that kind of delineates these front and back areas. And we want to save all those as well as celebrate them and make places around them. A little bit to the right of that, you see all those little black astracees everywhere. Those are roughly where the Gary Oaks are located. And so we're going to be adding to those. Continuing to that side, there's a wetland, which takes the form of open and forested wetland. And then continuing up to the top right is, it's like a mixed conifer stand. And it has some open areas, but it's mostly forested. And then, of course, we've talked with you guys about this at several of the previous meetings, but creating some landform in here to really help reinforce that prairie character. You see here on the bottom left, there's mima mounds. And so what we want is actually kind of a variety of scale of landforms as well for different needs. And so here those are. We've got a really functional berm along the east. That's that 6-foot high berm along Indian Summer. We've got lawn mounds, you know, that you could sit on and gather, or you could roll down in the 3 kind of dots in the middle. And then on the west edge of the site around the playgrounds and skate park and spray ground, we want to have more of a natural kind of mound with native grasses and oaks, kind of providing a little bit of sense of enclosure in that area without overly enclosing it. And so we have sports fields, and I just want to note here too, we have incorporated into these sports fields, or I should say adjacent to them, warm-up areas that will help serve the sports fields and allow kind of multiple teams, a team to be on the field, another team to be getting ready without impacting other areas of the park. And we'll see those on the plan next. So you see the warm-up areas noted right there. Without those, teams warming up would be out like in lawn areas or other areas of the park. That kind of bluish gray area has 2 basketball courts and 6 pickleball courts. And there's actually some extra space in there. We wanted to provide some space for, excuse me, gatherings, like if there's a competition there for people who are participating in that to not have to leave the court area to be able to gather and you know, have events. Next slide. And these next slides are just going to show what we're calling play, but there's a whole bunch of different types of play. And so we're proposing some interactive games. Next. 2 more traditional playgrounds. And from previous input, we understand there's a desire to have kind of site themed. And so we have here farm themed and also natural area themed. And then we have climbing structures. Next slide. Which we see a really cool opportunity on this relatively flat park to get people up into the air, to get views all over through the park, but also up closer to that awesome Gary Oak canopy. The The picture top right is more of like a ropes course, but we welcome input on what kind of climbing structures are most desired too. Yeah, there's the ropes course one. Also a spray ground, and we're heavily leaning towards the farm inspired, but it could also be nature inspired. I think kind of both of those opportunities celebrate the site's history. And an actual skate park. Some of our early work had more distributed parks through, or I should call them skate spots throughout the park. And we heard that the need or desire was more of like a consolidated traditional skate park. And so that's what we're providing now. And a blend of site furnishings, primarily selected for comfort, but also durability and ability to support the concept. And so we'll develop these kind of as we dig into further phases of design. I'm really excited about this community table that was up on the top left, and just kind of giving an opportunity for community members to comfortably share a common table and experience together. Next slide. So we call this an attitude of play, in that kind of the entire park, all these elements are all arranged in a way that you could kind of go from one element to the other and have opportunities for play throughout the park. You see I just wanted to point out one thing here. The climbing structures kind of nestled down there near all the existing Gary Oaks. So we really do see that opportunity to kind of get up on a climbing structure in the tree canopy and have that experience that you can only have here at this park. Next slide. And with the kind of farm vernacular buildings there on site, I don't know if everyone's seen them. There's actually some that aren't there anymore, but there's still some left. Has definitely inspired our architecture for the site, but with a more contemporary take. And so we're looking at materials like metal roofs, natural wood, honest type materials. We want the structures to have generous covered spaces. And for the community garden, we're visualizing a collection of small buildings kind of for individual uses, such as tool storage, drying, food sharing, gathering, to almost create or sort of recreate that farm experience of these organic buildings that are kind of like not haphazardly, but arranged around a purpose rather than all laid out on some grid. Next slide. And so, yeah, those buildings support the community garden, which is an expandable space formed in the near term by the strawberry fields on the north and all the park on the east. This approach allows for expansions to incorporate food production beyond seasonal veggies, perhaps fruit trees, berry, ground covers, and shrubs, and also learning about food production, which is kind of another opportunity to celebrate the site's history. So there you see, kind of starting in that bottom center location near the garden shed, we'd start at that end and kind of just expand out as needed. So the Bike Skills Park is woven into the forest with an eye towards preserving all the trees in that area, weaving trails through the forest, but is also supported by a more intensive bike area in the opening in the forest adjacent to that, where larger elements, tracks, and jumps could be built over time. Next slide. So we looked at that dog park location earlier, but I'll just describe it a little bit. We want to provide a dog park nestled into that kind of existing clearing, retain all the mature trees, fence the park, and provide separate areas for shy or small dogs, and then another one for the rest of the dogs, including the social ones. These will be furnished with a variety of skills and play features for the dogs that you saw in those character images back there. So you can kind of, it's a little faint here, but inside that red dashed bubble, you can see, and this isn't our like specific layout of the bike trails, but more just an example of the kind of trail network that could be built through that forest. without significantly disturbing it. Next slide. So we are currently working with the city to develop a draft call for artists to develop art for the park. You might know Parks participates in the 1% for Art program. And so to maximize those dollars, we intend to put the call out and work with the committee to select an artist that will actually work with our design team during the design. So what does that really mean? It means the artist's role in the team will be to influence and inspire outcomes that are documented and completed as part of the design team's work. The artist will be integrated into the team as an additional voice to shape the very DNA of the design. As an example, the project top left there, I don't know if you can see it, it's a little small on my screen, it's a red pipe in the form of a fish. It's actually two different pieces of pipe. We worked with an artist on a different project to realize that. And the approach she developed is it's actually two pieces of pipe. And so as you travel along the boardwalk, there's a certain spot you get to where the two pieces visually come together and make a form, in this case, a fish. There's another one in the background, I think it's a bird. But it's this way to have sort of an experience that unfolds as one passes through the site, as opposed to like an object you find in the site. Next slide. Just a reminder, we did hear loud and clear that a variety of walking services was desired, and we intend to achieve those, but I'll say that the kind of primary loop through the park, just for the functional needs, those emergency and service and maintenance access, will be asphalt with a concrete kind of shoulder path as well. Next slide. But we definitely heard loud and clear that a variety of services is needed, and we will be providing those. We will seek to incorporate boardwalks, gravel paths, asphalt paths, wood chips, and also simple footpaths worn into that oak savanna landscape. So here's that trail system, kind of, excuse me. Along that west edge of the site, we have about a quarter mile of sidewalk that's already existing. It will need a little bit of improvement along Yelm Highway. Along the Hamptons, we've got another approximate quarter mile of sidewalk to get into the park. Some of that's existing, some will need to be provided. And then along the east edge, there's about roughly another quarter mile walk to get to that main loop too. The main loop that I described earlier is about 2/3 of a mile. That could be used for pedestrians, bicyclists, rollerbladers. It'll be 20 feet wide, and so can host a lot of different activities simultaneously. And then the path I'm most excited about is the secondary loop. And that'll be made up of a variety of walking surfaces and pass through all the different ecologies of the park, including the oak savanna, the open and forest wetlands, the upland forest, and forest clearings. This path in particular is more about experience than about getting to places, offering not just the opportunity to see the ecologies, but to learn about them and experience them with fresh eyes through art. Next slide. Wow, that was really quick. I'm really looking forward to having public meetings where we can see and hear all you guys during the presentation, but I think that caps up the presentation part. And I see we've gotten a lot of Q&A questions already. There's Andy.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Appreciate the presentation, and like to actually invite all of our presenters here to the table, and we do have a couple of questions. And please, for those that have joined us this evening, if you have any other questions you haven't submitted, or if anything comes up, please feel free to continue to populate. All right, so what I'll do is I'll read the question out loud here, and then we'll tee it up and hopefully get everything answered. If we don't fully answer the question. If there's some follow-up, please feel free to include any information in the Q&A again, and we can loop back to it. So the first question is, Indian Summer has a fence. Why is there so much property dedicated to buffering those homes? So I think maybe for that one, Matt, do you want to start it off? And then I think we'll invite some folks from Olympia Parks to weigh in on that.
Yeah, so if we look at the kind of all the neighbors as a whole, we've got the Hamptons on the west. Those are a little different in that there's actually a public right-of-way, a street separating it from the park. And so it's already has a lot of distance in that buffer. We heard concerns from those neighbors, but we also heard a lot of concerns from Indian Summer, and their backyard abuts right on the park. And so we were doing our best as designers to try to mitigate their concerns. And so kind of just working through studies, knowing that we needed to get a berm of sufficient height, we arrived at 80 feet to provide that buffer. I should say it didn't really limit our ability to fit other programmatic elements.
Perfect. And I don't know, Laura, do you or Jonathan, if you have anything to add?
Sure. Yeah. Just where our intention is to hopefully be a good neighbor and trying to do the best we can to ensure that that happens. We hope that this park will be seen as a benefit to everyone who lives around it and not a drawback in any way. So yeah, that's kind of the position we're working from.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so the next question, does this design maximize the areas dedicated to recreation sports fields? This is one of the reasons that the plan was aiming for a community park. And I think, Matt, do you want to tee that one up, and then we can have others? Part of this, I know too, the question, I think there's another question later as well as about how many sports fields fit on the northern part where the secondary school is. So that's part of this equation.
I was looking at both of those. So the park, I think Parks purchased the property. They had done some studies and the vision was already established to have 4 full-size synthetic rectangular soccer fields. And so we're showing 3 on the plan right now. If the co-location study were not to happen, and I'm kind of, or not the study, but if the co-location with the school district weren't to happen, we would be showing 4. And so kind of getting to that second question, if we really wanted to, we could fit probably 3 more fields in the north part without the school there. But I had actually asked Parks about this, and I understand that there wasn't a need or a desire to have more than 4 on this site. And so I would say, yes, we're maximizing the areas needed for recreational sports. And there's also areas left over for other activities.
I guess I would just add to that, our existing community parks we have right now, in addition to, of course, the huge need for dedicated soccer fields, which we don't have at all in our park system, we're also bursting at the seams in our community parks for space for other recreation amenities, and we're hearing a lot from the community of a desire for another skate court, for instance, or an area for climbing walls and things like that we don't have in any of our, but we have one skate court now, one large one, but there's just not much space at Yager Park or Stevens Field or anything like that to add some of these community-wide amenities. So while a big focus of this park would be for those dedicated big rectangles, it also provides a really good opportunity for some of these other recreational amenities that we're hearing from the community that they're interested in.
I'd also kind of seconding what you were saying, Jonathan. There was that, and I summarized this earlier, but there was a strong message from the community from earlier survey about people coming to the park to use other amenities and not just the sports fields. And so I think we would do a disservice if we just maxed out the park for sports fields without those other amenities, especially to families with, you know, multi-generational or kids of different ages or kids who are into different things.
I'll add too, just another factor. If we were to partner with the school district, the concept is that they would also build a field that would be shared, which would result in 4 fields at the site still. Additionally, it'd be expected that there would be some type of swap of resources, whether that be land or money. And if it were land, there's a potential that there could be additional fields at whatever land is swapped, which then would benefit residents in other areas of the community rather than putting all the fields at one location in the southeast corner of the town. So there's still a lot of questions and work to be done with the school district co-location concept, but I would say there's potentially opportunity for more soccer fields with a partnership than without. And it's important to understand that context.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Paul. And then I don't know, we did answer the third question here. How many more sports fields will be possible on the north part of the site? I don't know if without school locating here, if you have anything else you wanted to add, Paul, or anybody else. I think Matt handled that pretty well. All right, so with that, we'll move on to the next question. And this looks like we're talking about north of the Life Estate. The lease property is the Hampton homes. And the comment here, there's an old fence there by the city and many tall tree stumps. I see a path in the field. They will, and I probably need to do a little wordsmithing here, therefore south of the homes, the adjacent homes. Wondering what buffer will be there. Didn't really see one on the plans. Matt, do you want to address that and what we're seeing on the drawings?
So
I think Steph is also going to bring up a site plan here.
I totally understand the question. There are a lot of existing trees along that property line north of the Life Estate. And the only park kind of activities we're proposing in that area is a pathway. And so we don't have as intensive as a buffer in other areas where we have like fields or parking. But we could definitely provide more planting along that edge to do some more buffering. It's here, I'll just mark it. Do I have that ability here?
I believe you should.
Yeah. So I think like some additional planting in this area would help with that buffer, if I'm reading this question right. But I mean, keep in mind, all we'd be buffering it from is like passive park pathways as opposed to actively programmed. But it seems like that'd be a great thing to incorporate.
All right, perfect. Thank you for the comment.
Sorry for my scribble.
All right, the next question, and I may tee this one up to Laura or Jonathan. Will there be water and power available at the covered shelters? Wondering probably a little bit how parks operations work for these.
Yeah, so we often have power available at our picnic shelters. Water is not as common of an amenity. So I guess I wouldn't say for sure about that, but power is typical. Jonathan, do you have any?
Yeah, and we sometimes have water too. Yeah, I think we just haven't gotten to that level of detail just yet. So yeah, I'm not sure we're quite there yet.
I'm curious if the desire for water is for like drinking fountains or like washing water or like a spigot. If we knew more, we could, work to try to incorporate it.
Yeah, well, I think we have a mix in our parks. If you go to Lions Park, for example, there's a full sink in one of the shelters, which is convenient if you're hosting birthday parties and things like that. Other parks don't have that. Some have power, some have nothing. So there's a mixture. And I think what would be helpful is in the survey that happens after this, if folks could communicate, where their priorities are. Because I think at this point, there's options to do a variety of amenities. There's obviously, the more you include, the higher the cost of those things. And so there's a cost and a priority factor that will get weighed, but understanding community preferences is critical for amenities like that.
All right, perfect, thank you. So the next question is related to the design features and wondering, will there be a description of long-term operations and maintenance? Choosing what will be included, I would be influenced by a mix that is lower cost, for example. So that is a really great question. What I can say right off the bat here is we typically strive to find materials that are durable and long lasting, that are also low maintenance, that will really last for the lifetime of what they are expected for on the fields. And what I may do is turn that over to Jonathan or Laura if you want to add anything on long-term operations and maintenance and how that is handled with the design of a park.
No, I think you covered it well. I mean, again, that's something we're not quite at that level of detail just yet, but that will be something we will, of course, take into consideration and want to make sure we're designing things that are, both last a long time and are easy to maintain and energy efficient and that sort of thing. So we're not quite at that level of detail yet, but that will be considered.
I think adding to that, that's part of the reason we really are committed to synthetic turf fields versus natural grass. They require much less water. You don't need chemicals to help the grass grow and stay green and healthy and lush. You don't have to mow it. You don't have to line it. So, I think that's a big part of the consideration of this community park versus some of the other ones that we manage, natural turf fields, which are also have benefits as well. But I think the maintenance side of turf management is a key purpose for the route we're going here.
All right.
I'll just add too that part of the program from Parks is for a maintenance facility to provide a lot of those maintenance services on site. I think that's a great acknowledgement, knowing that a park with this many uses is going to require a fair amount of attention and maintenance. And then on top of that, as designers, as part of what we're doing, we will be working with Parks to provide sort of a maintenance and operations estimate of like the hours and kind of the things that are needed. And with a phased approach and kind of understanding the maintenance needed, we'll be able to develop the park and have the maintenance available for what is actually being built.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Matt. And so next question we have is, can you describe the connection to the Chehalis Western Trail? And I know, Paul, you may have a little bit to weigh in on that, or Laura, you look like you're ready to say something.
I can talk about it. The Chehalis Western, those that live here are familiar with it. It's the largest trail network in Thurston County. And there is undeveloped property to the south and then to the east of this property. And the city does not own easements or right of way at this time, but one of the things that we were hoping to do in the process of the master plan was at least identify hope or a future desire to eventually connect that trail network to this community park. There's also an opportunity to do that along the sidewalks of Yelm Highway as well. So there is other options, but the ability to extend that trail network through natural areas is something that we think we would love to do, and we think would be a great community benefit for trail users and neighbors and others alike. So that's why that's noted on there, is just to show the intent and the hope to eventually achieve that. But there's no right of way secured at this point. It's a aspirational hope.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Paul. And this one, we might have a little bit, I don't know if anybody else on the team caught, there was a question here from Bob about, did you say bridle path? And
I might have, but if I did, I didn't mean to, but there's no bridle paths.
Okay.
Although I assume like someone having a wedding could maybe rent one of the shelters and have their own bridle path.
There we go. Perfect. All right, so hopefully that answered that question. If not, let us know. The next question is a very astute listener here tonight, our follower. Is there a fire station still in the plan? Paul, do you want to handle that one?
I'll speak to that. So if the city moves forward with annexation in the southeast in this area, which is currently being evaluated, there is a need for an additional fire station in this area of town. This park has been talked about as a possibility for that. If it were to go, it would not go in this developed portion of the park that we're looking at, which is the main park court. It would be out closer to Yelm Highway. So it, annexation is not an official decision and is still under consideration, and that would be further defined as we looked at it and as we looked at the exterior of the park development. So it has not been ruled out, but it also hasn't been 100% ruled in yet. So it's still under consideration. But again, because that's not the focal part of this portion of the design that we're focused on tonight, that's why it's not shown on here at this point.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Paul. So the next one, we have a little bit of follow-up on the buffer here between the Hamptons to the north. So the comment begins, there is no right-of-way separated in the Hamptons to the north, yes, to the west of the park, but not the north at all. Just old stumps and broken fence that the city owns. What will be done for this? For example, like Indian Summer. People will park on 57th to walk in or over the city's low fence. Needs to be refenced and or buffered. So I think this is great input. We will continue to look at this and make sure we have ample buffer. I think I want to just make sure we're understanding here where exactly this is. I think, Matt, are you following?
I've been puzzling over this one for a little while. Because like the road pretty much ends like here. So if you wanted to enter the park from there, you could walk along that way. But this north property line that keeps being referenced, I think it's this edge. But what I'm not following is where people would access that edge to enter the park, or what, like the specific concern. I don't know if we can have, I don't think the person's name is fully there. I don't know if we can have them unmuted so they can share it, or.
Yeah, maybe if there is any, here, there's some, so there, I've scrolled down to the bottom. They've said, yes, they'd walk along parking at 57th. So I think it's more along Hampton Street there. No, that's not correct.
It's just maybe this. I don't know if it's something we should follow up on or what. I feel like I don't fully understand the concern.
So 57th Street is not shown on this plan, but it's roughly here. And yeah, it doesn't dead end into the park.
What I'm going to attempt to do here, if it's all right with the group, is see if we can allow this person to speak, where I think that might help us answer the question. So we're going to give this a shot.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Rick Ketchledge, and we live at 3241 57th Avenue. So where I'm talking about, if you see the walk path that's going from east to west, and this would be north of the life lease property. You see where I'm talking about, right?
This one.
Okay. Now look at the houses, correct. Now look at the houses immediately north to that. There's 7 homes that are running up and down, including to the north, or sorry, to the, this would be to the east. There's a other house there that's not part of our subdivision. These houses along the Hamptons, we had the city come in this year and they took down 20 trees with large stumps, we attached a field fence to it because it was falling down, and the city now owns that because they bought that property with the field fence and the trees from the life lease owner. That fence is easily 30, 40 years old. It's falling down. It actually turns and goes up toward the south with the houses down toward the bottom of your picture. And I'm going to tell you now, the fence looks really bad and the stumps look really bad. This is a temporary thing. And we worked with the city and the city council to have all of this removed as far as the tree stumps, because they were destroying our alley. So now what's happened is with this, what you've got there is, and we've got weeds, we've got debris behind the fence that the city never cleaned up. So, I'm surprised if you guys even put a buffer in and would leave all that. And the other concern is immediately to the north of those homes is 57th. Yes, it dead ends, but what you're going to end up having happen is people are going to park along our front of our houses, and there's not a lot of spots, but they're going to park along there on 57th to walk in on a cut-through road that goes to the back alley. And if you look at the line you've got there running east and west, there's actually a bigger gap between 4 of the homes and then 3 more or 4 more. And that's actually an alley parkway that comes into the alley in the back. And we're going to have people come over the fence because the fence is not that tall. So my concern is all of that, the parking, also longevity of the fence. And your city bought it, you guys bought it. So it's really on you to figure out, I guess, what to do with the fence and the tree stumps and the parking issue.
I'm looking at it on Google Maps. I think I know what you're talking about. That's too big, but I see that driveway.
Yeah. We just paid $5,000 to have that driveway redone because of the trees, and we really appreciate, I forget his name at the city, Sam Baker. He came out and worked with us, and they took down 20 trees. So we wouldn't have the damage to the alley. We had the alley repaved, but of course now we're looking at these tall tree stumps and the fence is attached to it because the fence was falling down, and it's got you guys aren't going to want this, but it's got barbed wire on it from the life lease owner who put this in. So I'm just letting you know up front, because it sounds like you guys were not unaware of that. I would suggest walking the property out there and seeing it, but just be aware.
Well, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention, and we will make sure that we address this as part of the planning effort. And I know Laura and Paul and Jonathan will look into it as well. Or I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that from the park side.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm understanding what you're talking about. And so we'll go out and take a look at what's going on out there right now. And then we'll keep this in mind for the future, as well as we're working on this plan. So thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it. And just so everybody's aware, the HOA is concerned about this as well. So this is an overall concern. So appreciate it.
All right.
Also, thanks for the feedback on Sam Baker. He's part of our maintenance team and
He's
one
awesome.
of our longtime rock stars for our department.
He's awesome.
So appreciate the feedback.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. Let's see. So the next question, instead of a boardwalk across the wetlands, has an observation deck been considered? A boardwalk would disturb the wildlife, especially if dogs are permitted. So Matt, I know we've talked about this quite a bit. Do you want to handle some of the thoughts we've had on that?
Yeah. We definitely considered an observation deck. I know in public input, we had a question specifically to see if people wanted to get up higher to have views, across the site and out of the site. And the resounding response was no, which I was surprised about. But even so, I do think an observation deck would be great. In our boardwalk design, which is pretty preliminary, there's this kind of kink at the bottom right area where we try and get the boardwalk as high as possible. So it'd be up in that forested wetland. And you'd kind of have views into the canopy. As far as the actual disturbance to the wildlife, they do disturb wildlife. And part of the process to get that permitted and built is to demonstrate the need. And so I think we wouldn't be able to just put a boardwalk through the wetland without a need, but I think the considerations of connecting to the Chehalis Trail and other things like that would impact it. And so I did say it's one of those elements on the plan where we're we're trying to provide it, but it definitely has a lot of technical aspects that need to be worked out as that proceeds.
Yeah, and I'll add just quickly too, as some of it does go through areas of the wetlands that have been disturbed. They were converted
Yeah.
into a blueberry farm, and so they do provide a lot of opportunity to actually increase habitat and then provide opportunities for people to view and see wildlife. But you do have a valid concern where we may need to think about how bikes may interface or where they can go to think
And-
about wildlife. So very good comment.
Thanks for bringing that up too. Like specifically on that layout, we tried to align it through areas of the wetland that were already disturbed that have invasive species. And so we've done that to the maximum extent possible. And, you know, if it were to be permitted, it would require mitigation. So as Andy noted, it would be required to result in a functional lift to the wetland habitat.
I think too, I'll just add just an experience, you know, wetland trails are very popular in the state and several communities have them. One of the benefits of having a wetland trail is it helps you achieve a balance of public access, environmental education. If people can get close to it and see it and experience it, they're more likely to value it and protect it. It also manages the use and keeps people confined to the boardwalk. If it were just shut off, we found that people kind of make their own trails and their own paths, which can be much more devastating. And so, you know, I think this design really tries to strike that balance of how do we create and enhance a good experience while also doing what we can to protect the natural amenities and wildlife and habitat.
I guess one final thing I would add is that to your point about the impact of dogs, you know, in Grass Lake Nature Park is our one park where we don't allow dogs for that very reason. And so, you know, we could consider that for just this little boardwalk portion if that's determined that has a significant impact. You know, that is something that could be considered.
All right, perfect. Thank you for the comment. So next one we have here is sounds like a clarification on the fence along Indian Summer adjacent to the park is not 6 feet high, and just also saying that it doesn't provide any security to homes. And the question is, who would provide security?
We have 3 rangers that support security throughout our park system. And so they would be first responders. Also, if there was somebody breaking the law, the Olympia Police Department would respond, assuming this is annexed. If it's not annexed, then I believe the Sheriff's Department would be the go-to in terms of response, since this is currently in the urban growth area. So those would be the kind of the 3 leading. I'll say the rangers' goal is to address behavior at the lowest level. So if there is, you know, something nefarious that's happening, or people are starting to break park rules or become an issue, you know, a call to our ranger line, which they work 7 days a week, and they frequently respond to issues and concerns and have been very successful at proactively addressing issues and security in the park.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Paul. So our next question says, you've made no plans for the area being discussed for a high school. Why not? Does this mean that the high school is now a done deal? I can guarantee you it is not a done deal. There is still a lot of discussion happening, and Laura did cover some of that in the beginning of the presentation. I don't know if Paul, Laura, or Jonathan, if you have anything you want to add to help answer that question.
Yeah, I'll just add that we in order to break ground in 2024 and be eligible for state grants, we need to come up with an achievable phase 1 design. And there are benefits of doing the design in this area because it allows us to be able to maneuver either way. If the school district, if we do not achieve an agreement with the school district, we can continue to expand the park significantly to the north. If we do a school district, this design would complement that as well. So we've approached it and tried to focus on this area so that we could take the time and do the due diligence and answer the questions that have been raised and concerns, and allow the city council and the school board more time to have those discussions. So that's why the focus is on the back end of the park. And that's the approach we've taken now, so that we can maintain that timeline, pursue the next grant cycle, and start construction in 2024.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Paul. And I would add too, because that may lead to another question then, which is, well, what happens if the school is never built? And I think the answer to that is that we would likely, the Parks Department would go through a similar process to this to figure out what other park amenities would go there in the future. And a master plan update would be completed at that time. So there'd be more opportunity for input. And I would also, so the next comment here, I had called out as Bob, and I apologize. It was Bonnie Jacobs who had asked some of those questions, including the previous one. So I apologize for that. All right, the next question, is there a walking connection to the Hamptons? And Matt, do you want to point that out and highlight how that would work?
Yeah, so we're proposing a new sidewalk along the east side of that street. And so there's already sidewalks on the west side.
Perfect. So hopefully,
And then
yeah, go for it.
I see the next one about acreage, but I was just going to ask you, I know you're going to read it, but Steph, could you pull up that slide with the kind of acreage at the beginning?
All right, and while Steph is doing that, I'll read the next question. There are 28.5 acres to develop. In the proposed plan, Parks will develop 8.5 acres, which is only 30% of the acreage. 70% is set aside for the school. If all 28 acres or for the parks, has any thought gone into the overlap or interface with making the other 20 acres complement the 8.5 acres for a total of 28.5? I think I followed that.
I think it's like one of the, yeah.
Which number is it? Sorry.
Oh,
Bear with us for a moment.
I thought it was higher up in the presentation, but I'm not finding it. There it is. Sorry about that.
cool. So I think there's a mistake in the comment or an oversight. So we subtracted, oh, it went away. It's going to come back. So we already subtracted the 20 acres from the 86.5. You see it right there in the middle. So that 28.3 is not 8.3 for the park and 20 for the school, but rather 28.3 for the park.
So I think, let's see.
It's not, I don't, it's not a question, but the comment is not correct based on the math we provided.
So I have a calculator in front of me. So the school district is 20 acres, which is roughly, if that were to happen, it would be roughly about 23% of the property. The developable area is 28 acres, which would roughly be, hold on, about 32% of the property. And then the rest of the property, which now I'm doing math in my head, which is never good, which is about 45%, is the life lease and the wetland buffers. And so that's the percentage distribution. And the other thing that I would add is, again, potential being the key word in terms of the school, that's not a done decision, and that could be a future secondary school, or it could be additional park design in the future.
And I think too, so the question is actually getting at too, has there been any thought done into the overlap or interface and how all the land in and around what we've looked at today would complement the full site is, I believe, what we're looking at here. And I can say, yes, we have talked about that as a group in terms of the overall appearance and even how the school may interface as it is developed. So you have a park-like setting along Yelm. We're actually talking a lot too about native vegetation, and especially in light of some of the summer drought we're now experiencing, and how we could expand the Gary Oak Meadows in and around and integrate all of this into the property so you have a cohesive experience regardless of how it's developed moving forward. All right, I don't know if anybody had anything to add to that. And Doug, feel free to let us know if we need any follow-up on that. Let's see. Here's a related question: of the acres that were purchased, how many will be needed for the high school?
Well,
So I think hopefully that question was answered here when we went through this. There's 20 acres that have been set aside for the facilities that would be included. And that includes all support that they would need, and even the field and track that would be built on that property as well, potentially.
And I can just convey that discussions with the school district, they've said that typically if they were to plan a ideal property for a high school, they would target 40 acres. What they've made a commitment that if there was a deal that were to happen, they would find a way to compact the school to the extent possible, go up rather than out, and even look to have some supporting amenities potentially be offsite. And so when they came with their approach, they also have really expressed a desire to work with the city to try and minimize their impact to the extent possible if it's determined that a deal should happen.
All right. So next question here is wondering why there's not been any design provided with the parking lot in a different location does not impact the homes. I'm assuming this is adjacent to Indian Summer. Also did not hear anyone address the parking lot lighting issue. So Matt, do you want to maybe hit on some of the thoughts on, well, we'll cover the parking lot lighting, but then also some options we have with the way parking could be developed.
Yeah, can we go to that berm slide stuff? And while we're going there, Doug, I'm sorry, I'm realizing I probably could have packaged these numbers in a more kind of legible and intuitive format, and I did go through them really quick, but I was kind of just going and back checking it, and it does appear there was like 36 acres available for intensive park uses. So regarding the lighting, we think we can get away with 14-foot light poles. And so with a 6-foot berm and planting, there should be almost complete screening of your ability to even see the lights. And with the lights that we would select, they're almost complete cutoff. And so there's not like light trespass across the property line.
And I'd also add, we typically choose fixtures that are night sky compliant for most applications like this. So you really are directing the light, and we're trying to eliminate any glare or reflection back.
There is a second part of that though. So
yeah,
one of the things I kind of went over our rationale for where the parking lot's located, but if we consider alternate locations such as like in the center of the park or the west of the park, one of the things we're trying to achieve is pedestrian safety. And so to the maximum extent possible, we're trying to eliminate places where pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic cross, which becomes increasingly more difficult as you put parking in the middle of the park. And so that's kind of one of our reasons. Like we could even have like parking all over the park, but that also runs up into sort of an efficiency of space use issue where you'd have driveways kind of bisecting the park. It just, with the kind of logical access being off Wiggins, the shortest possible driveway to that parking lot from Yelm Highway is achieved by having that parking as close as possible to Wiggins. But also, you know, putting it far enough into the park that it's in close proximity to the recreational amenities. If you remember earlier, we were trying to discourage people from parking in the adjacent neighborhood by providing parking that's closer to the amenities in the park. And so the more we start kind of moving that around and bisecting the park with driveways, it starts kind of falling apart and safety is not as good.
All right. Thank you, Matt. And I'm going to actually jump back. Doug did respond to you, Matt. He says, my numbers were wrong. Didn't see the data long enough. The way it's presented may imply the school is a given. Maybe the undeveloped area can be shown with letters over it saying phase 2. And I think that's a really valid comment. So perfect. Just wanted to catch that here while it was still fresh. So the next question is, what is the Parks Department planning for additional community parks if the school is located here? The school being located here would reduce this to a much smaller park than the parcel was originally purchased for. So I think, Paul, do you want to tackle that one?
I can take that a little bit, and then, you know, I don't know if Laura or Jonathan have anything to add related to the current park plan process that's underway and the feedback that we're getting and where we're at in terms of meeting our community park needs. The single, you know, most need right now is soccer fields, which this development achieves for us. This would be, I believe, in terms of athletic field complexes, this would be our first one with soccer fields and our fourth field complex, if you count Stevens Field, LBA, Yager, and then this one. If the school district trade were to happen, you know, the one hope would be that it would be a land swap, which would present an opportunity to develop a comparable size community park that's swapped. That doesn't mean that's exactly what would happen. I think that would be part of the discussion and part of, hopefully, if you know, even if citizens have opinions about that, I would encourage you to weigh in and share your thoughts about if there were a deal to happen. What are the priorities that the Parks Department should consider in terms of benefits of a potential trade? Because it is a significant resource that was purchased with significant voted tax dollars for parks. And so those parks benefits should be realized in any potential property swap. So I hope that's answered the question in terms of until we would know what or where that property would be or what that swap looks like. It's hard for me to definitively answer that question, but we would likely be looking for areas of the community that aren't currently served by community parks, if possible. So Jonathan and Laura, I don't know if you have anything to add to that kind of rambling long answer. Sorry about that.
I don't think I really have anything else to add. We do have a parks plan update that is underway right now. And if anyone's interested in that process, it's a 6-year plan with a 20-year outlook. And that's also available on Engage Olympia to take a look at. We should have a draft plan for the public to start reviewing in September. So keep an eye out and you can take a look and see if our plans are what you're hoping for.
All right, perfect, thank you. And then we have a comment here to the design team. We will take this into consideration, and our apologies if we confused anybody, but the comment is, it's disorienting to look at images that do not have the top as north. Please show images with north at the top head to the image. But we did try to put a north arrow, which you can see on the screen here, to help orient, and but we will take that into consideration for future presentations. And our final question tonight, which is about on time here with what we said we would take for the presentation and Q&A tonight. And it's a question, do you know if the school system is still looking for land for a high school? And I don't know,
I think,
Paul, do you?
yeah, I think that question's best directed towards school district staff or board members. I don't think we're in a position to answer that on their behalf because we're not that familiar with all of their land acquisition efforts. So whether it be Jennifer Pretty, who's the assistant superintendent, who's been on point from a staff to staff level, or any of the school board members are probably where I would direct that question.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And with that, well, this is actually a great wrap up here. We got a thank you, well done presentation, impressed with the level of design, thought, and all the considerations. Well done. So with that, I think I will hand it back to Matt and Laura, and we can wrap up the meeting.
I was just going to put a plug in for the online survey, which if it's not already active, should be active in the coming days, where you can provide more input.
Yes, tomorrow. I don't believe it's up yet, but tomorrow, if you check Engage Olympia, we should have the survey available that you can take, the recording of this, as well as the slide deck of presentation slides. And we're planning to keep that online survey open until the 30th of August. So we've got almost a month for folks to give us some input on what you saw here tonight. And yeah, always available for questions. You can get in touch with me. My contact information is on the Engage Olympia website as well. So.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate all of our panelists for joining us tonight and helping with the presentation and the Q&A. And most importantly, I'd like to thank members from the public and neighbors of the park who joined us tonight to provide feedback. And we look forward to hearing what others have to say as this is posted online and we gather more from more people in the neighborhood and in the community. All right, with that, we'll say good night and thank you again, everybody. And we'll hope to hear from you soon.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.